Aloha and welcome to Talk Story with Keli'i Akina on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm your host, Keli'i Akina. Today we're talking about one of the most consequential issues facing Hawaii's future: how we generate reliable, affordable electricity while reducing our dependence on oil and meeting our clean energy goals. My guest today is Clint Churchill. Clint, who has been an energy expert and corporate CEO, argues that liquefied natural gas, often called LNG, should be part of Hawaii's energy mix as a bridge away from oil, even as the state continues to expand renewable energy. Now, this is a controversial position in Hawaii, where many policymakers and activists oppose LNG altogether. Tonight, or today, we're going to examine the reasoning behind that argument, the trade-offs involved, and what's really at stake for Oahu's energy future and for the state. Please welcome to the program my guest, Clint Churchill. Clint, glad to have you on board.
Thank you for having me, Keli'i.
Well, let's start with a big picture. Can you help us out with the basics? You point out in your writings that despite years of renewable investment, Oahu still generates roughly 2/3 of its electricity by burning oil. Why is that fact so central to your argument?
Let's back up one step. Some 10 years ago, we passed a bill, became law, that 100% renewable energy. So that set us on a path that felt good, but there was no plan to get to 2045, to get to 100%. So what we've learned in this decade is quite a bit. Where is the power going to come from? We've learned that if it's going to be utility solar farms, it's going to take a huge amount of acreage. By HECO's first integrated grid plan, that would have taken some 15,000 acres of land. So we've got to find a different alternative to get us transition to 2045. And LNG has emerged as both a cost savings for ratepayers and better for the environment. LNG burns 30% cleaner than burning oil. And by HECO's own estimate, we could save $1 billion per decade versus burning oil.
Now, before we get into the case for LNG, you've already mentioned renewables, and I want to clarify something here. You're clear that you're not arguing against renewables. You describe LNG rather as a bridge fuel. So tell us what exactly that means, and how long do you realistically expect LNG to function as a bridge fuel?
It's both a bridge fuel, and if, despite our very best efforts to go 100% renewable, we simply can't get there. If we run into walls, in other words, we're past 50% on Oahu of rooftop penetration for solar panels, but that generates only about 16% of our total demand. The Oahu demand, picture all of the high rises, apartments, Waikiki, everything downtown Honolulu. That's a lot of energy usage at night. So we've got to find a way to bridge that. And our view is it is so costly to count on totally utility solar farms to generate that power to make it reliable. You have a choice. Invest in batteries, massive investments in batteries to make it reliable, or you can burn biofuel. But those are neither of those, in our view, is good for the ratepayer. So while we all really want to get as far as we can on renewable, we're going to hit a couple of walls.
Well, there are a lot of people who are placing their faith and trust in renewables, and a lot of people who are very optimistic, who believe that we can achieve the state's statutory goal of 100% renewables by the year 2045. Let's grant that for the sake of discussion. And let me ask you this question. How reliable will the electric grid be during the transition? What can we anticipate?
Well, that's certainly an issue. The greater the percentage that we rely on solar, the greater the probability of having problems of keeping our electricity reliable. Um, let me talk from a slide. I'll hold it up. Through the PUC, in about 4 years of hearings and so forth, developed the far left column integrated grid plan. Um, that had some 22% of offshore wind, 10% from biofuel. As that's evolved, the uh, the state commission uh, on energy uh, dependence completely eliminated those two possibilities. So where then is the rest of that power? Almost a third of the power going to come from? Uh, the state commission's projections from the state energy office show even come 2045, some 26% of our power will be from LNG. So whereas we all want to get there, I love the solar on my roofs, I love my NEM metering, uh, but if we simply can't get there and don't have reliable energy, that's what LNG brings. You've got the ability to, with investment in new production generation units, you've got the ability to make sure we keep the lights on 24.
Now, one of the striking points you often discuss is that rooftop solar, as you've just mentioned, even at a very high adoption rate, only supplies a relatively small share of Oahu's total electricity demand. Why does solar hit a ceiling on an island grid like ours?
That's one of the great lessons learned in these 10 years since the 100% renewable was passed. We're just over 50% rooftop penetration on Oahu, yet that generates 16% of our power. So those that were thinking rooftop solar will satisfy everything to get us closer to 100%, simply isn't going to happen. Uh, so how far can we get with single family rooftop solar? Let's say we're optimistic and get up to 75%. That last 25%, there's going to be people that simply don't want to put solar on their roof, whether for cost and finance reasons or aesthetics. Don't like the what it looks like. So that's going to happen. So if we were to get to 75%, let's say, that's about 24% of our total power. Again, you have to look at all of downtown Honolulu, all those apartments, all those condos, all the power you have to generate. They don't have rooftops to generate their own power.
Sometimes people argue that we should have no problem getting all the energy we need from solar because of all the sun we have. But how do you balance day and night over here? I would imagine that during the daytime, there would be the production of energy and the storage of it would take place at night, as well as the high demand for it. There are these kinds of balancing challenges that you address. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yes, of course the sun doesn't shine at night, so you have to somehow get that solar power to power the entire island from, let's say, 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. I have a son that lives up on Pacific Heights. Looks out over Diamond Head to the airport, and you scratch your head. Can all of that really run on batteries? So what that opens up is, what's the cost of that? Fortunately, we have a utility solar battery called Kapolei Energy Storage, but that battery farm costs $220 million. By HECO's own estimate, it will cost $500 million over a 20-year period to bring that power. But here's the kicker: that only provides less than 3% of the total daily demand on Oahu. So is it going to take 10 or 20 of those utility battery farms costing 200 million each? In fact, the Climate Change Commission, the State Energy Office quote on that, it's going to take massive investment in utility battery storage to achieve reliability.
One of the things that I'd like to go back to just for a moment, we skipped over it rather briefly, is that you argue that LNG would be cheaper and cleaner than continuing to burn fuel oil, thus its greater utility as a bridge and its superiority in terms of the environment. Can you quantify that difference for viewers, both in terms of emissions reductions and potential cost implications for ratepayers?
I'll hold up another graph. By the estimates of uh, those proposing LNG, ratepayers will save at least 15%. Well, how so? The fact is, LNG and thank goodness I call it Canada to the rescue. We can have kind of hemispheric uh, buffer between world events. With the war going on in Iran right now, surely the world price of oil will peak and get volatile. But LNG, because of huge capacity to export LNG out of British Columbia, coming on within 2 years, they'll have 15 million metric tons per year available to us. We'll use way less than 1 metric ton. LNG from Australia, other sources, depending. So we'll have less volatility. And by that chart, you'll see that big gap between the levelized based on per million uh, uh, BTU. Uh, the differential between the two is that $1 billion per decade that will be ratepayer savings.
You also note that replacing oil entirely with utility scale solar would require tens of thousands of acres of land. And so, if we look at an island like Oahu, how realistic is that? And we've got many concerns here. We've got political concerns, environmental concerns, cultural concerns.
When we passed the 100% renewable law, there was no plan, as I mentioned. The neighbor islands have uh, plenty of land relative to their energy demand. This is an Oahu problem. Uh, there are land availability that we badly need for housing to commit it long term, perhaps forever, to solar panels. We think is poor policy planning. The back to the first chart that we put up, uh, the Climate Change Commission, 32% of our power coming from utility solar farms. That's 13,000 acres. And still, on that chart in the middle column, there's 26% of our energy after 2045 has to come from somewhere. Well, we hit the wall on single family rooftops. We're going to also hit the wall on land. There's only so much land we can dedicate. And so that leaves, let's work our way to 2045 and go as hard as we can, every best effort for 100% renewable. But if we don't get there, the view of our institute is we're far better off having the infrastructure and having experience generating electricity from LNG than continuing the status quo.
Some of the critics of LNG have argued that we could basically just build more batteries. And what is your thought about that? What are the technical and economic limits of battery storage that are sometimes overlooked?
One issue is what's their battery life? So an issue on LNG versus batteries is the infrastructure investment. Um, the state energy office projection of a $2 billion cost to have an offshore liquefaction vessel, pipelines to get it to Campbell Industrial Park over to Kaliloa and phase two to Kahi Power Plant. So that $2 billion would be avoided if we ban. But what we point out is what is the cost of reliability? As I mentioned before, the the cost of battery storage is just prohibitive. That massive investment in batteries will far exceed the investment in uh, LNG infrastructure. So It's a clear choice, I think, that we have to place our capital in the right place. And batteries, as we all know from our iPhones and our flashlights, have a limited life. So come 20 years, will all of those battery farms have to be replaced? And we'll have to do multi-billion dollars investments yet again. But the investment in LNG infrastructure lasts at least 30 years, 40 years, or even longer, is a far more prudent allocation of our investments.
So you're saying that if we extrapolate to the future by maybe 30 years, we'll see that the $2 billion infrastructure cost for LNG is actually more economical than the long-term costs of all the renewables plus batteries together.
Brings up an interesting argument of those opposing LNG called stranded asset. If we get to 100% renewable by 2045, will we have this investment, a 40-year amortization of the 2 billion, let's say, will that be stranded? Our view is we need to apply good judgment as to whether we can get to 100% renewable by 2045. Our view is because we're going to hit the wall on the cost of making solar reliable, we're going to hit the wall on rooftop penetration, and we're going to hit the wall on how much land we should commit to utility solar farms. All of those combine to the conclusion that we may not get to 100% renewable. So what's best? Continuing on the status quo of burning oil, or having infrastructure to perhaps go on many decades after 2045, should we not be able to get there?
Well, certainly decades is a much longer term than politicians hold in office. And so the decisions that have to be made, hopefully, will be free of political concern, or unfortunately, may very well be constrained by the short term that legislators have. But looking ahead in the future, LNG infrastructure, you say, can last 30 to 40 years. What is the lifespan of batteries that are needed for renewables in terms of their replacement time?
Reference to 20 years, you're going to start getting diminishing um, utility from battery farms probably after 10 years. So you can just draw a gradually declining line. I think we all know from our iPhones how much more you have to, if you owned it very long, how much more frequently you have to recharge it. And remember, these battery farms, they're just middlemen in the energy transfer. They don't produce a single kilowatt of electricity. They just take what the solar farms or whatever source of power happens to be, and pass it on. So yeah, you raise a good point that most of that investment to make utility solar farms reliable will have to be replaced in some 20 years.
That's a difficult way to think for public policymakers, thinking about durability, replacement cycles, and so forth. But we have to look at that in terms of the finiteness of resources here on the island. Well, let me talk with you a bit about supply and security and volatility. Those are major concerns, especially now that the world is immersed in quite a bit of turmoil across the planet that in some way has an impact upon our energy supply. Does LNG expose Hawaii to global gas markets and price shocks? What is your opinion?
The opportunity we have, in large part because of the capacity that's coming on in British Columbia. Canada has huge amounts of natural gas. So they're investing, their companies are, some $50 billion in liquefaction and export capacity out of British Columbia. I'll hold up a third chart for when uh, for when we get the editing done. And so within about 2 years, we're going to have 15 million metric tons per annum available. Hawaii uses or will use less than 1 million metric tons. So in a way, the big plus of all this is what we call hemispheric LNG supply will help to shield us from the geopolitical disruptions in the world price of oil. So when these wars go off, Putin invades and so forth, and volatility and the price of oil, if you oppose LNG and you want to ban LNG, you're committing us to continuing that volatility, and we argue that the volatility would be far less. You can enter into 10, 15, 20-year contracts from Canada, from Australia, in our hemisphere, subject to indexes such as the Alberta AECO, Alberta Energy Company Index for Canadian natural gas. So that's why we did this chart. Um, that's where the reduction of volatility, in addition to all of the other benefits of converting to LNG, will be huge for the ratepayer.
Being located in the most isolated archipelago on Earth, we have concerns over energy security, or in fact, over security in terms of our food supply and virtually every other commodity. Being an island here in the Pacific, does LNG make Hawaii more resilient or more vulnerable?
I think we would argue that we would make it more resilient. Again, we would source LNG. Uh, uh, there's a consortium of Japanese utilities, JERA, that's very interested. In fact, it's been announced a memorandum of understanding with state governor, with Governor Green, for their possible investment in Hawaii. They're the leading importer of LNG to Japan. There are some, it's kind of revelation to me, there are some 500 LNG ships that roam the world. The world has shifted a lot from coal and oil to LNG. The world's passing us by if we don't take advantage of the opportunity to convert to LNG. Look at the Caribbean islands; almost all of them have some percentage of their electricity generated from LNG. But here we are, in a way, kind of in the Stone Age. JERA was surprised that Hawaii is still generating electricity from oil.
LNG, nonetheless, is a controversial issue today. It's almost taboo to talk about in certain circles. Why do you think opposition to LNG has become so entrenched, even when oil remains the dominant fuel, and it has its detractors?
I would say it's the hope that we can get to 100% renewable. Um, we passed that law, and anything that speaks out against getting to 100% renewable, Governor Ige, you know, implemented a de facto ban on LNG some 10 years ago. That cost Oahu ratepayers the $1 billion per decade. Um, so any discussion about switching to LNG kind of assumes that we would slow down and stop trying to get a higher percentage of renewables. Our institute disagrees with that. We should make every effort. We should continue subsidies for rooftop solar. We should somehow find a way for property owners, mainly the shopping center property owners, to cover their parking lots with solar, industrial buildings, the military bases, and so forth. So we should continue every effort to get to a higher percentage of solar. It's not going to be wind. We're not going to have floating windmills going to Molokai. We doubt that there's going to be much more land-based wind farms. Go to Kahuku and ask them how they feel about their windmills. So so all of this adds up to LNG being clearly the right solution from both a cost standpoint to the ratepayers and improvement for CO2 emissions into the environment.
Clint, as we come to the conclusion, let me ask you this question. If you were sitting down with the governor or other state leaders today, how would you advise them in terms of a realistic, balanced energy strategy for Oahu? What would that look like over the next 20 years? How would you seal the deal, make your case?
I would pat him on the back for being brave to step forward on LNG and reversing his predecessor's policy on LNG. I'd also pat the back of Mark Glick and his staff, particularly Monique Zanfes, who heads up Managing Director of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy for the State Energy Office, to realize, to go through the very detailed and very well done analysis of all the alternatives. They've dismissed that floating windmills make sense. They've dismissed that costly biofuel, double the cost of whatever we burn, makes any sense. So I would say stay on course for LNG, continue to subsidize solar for single family, find a way for the barriers for the shopping centers to get all of those parking lots covered. And I would also bring in the military commanders. They've got a lot of land, particularly the Navy. There's two solar projects at Westlock. Why aren't there more? Lualua. There's a lot of land on all the bases. All the military bases should be self-sufficient. So that reduces the demand on land that can and should be used for housing for utility solar farms by HECO.
Well, Clint, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm sure our viewers appreciate it greatly. Mahalo for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Keli'i. Appreciate it.
We've been talking with Clint Churchill of the Practical Policy Institute of Hawaii. He's been arguing that liquefied natural gas should play a role in Oahu's transition away from oil. Whether you agree or disagree with him, this debate has raised some fundamental questions about cost and reliability, the environmental impact, and honesty in public policy. Energy decisions made today will shape Hawaii's economy, environment, and quality of life for decades to come. I'm appreciative to the Practical Policy Institute of Hawaii and to Clint Churchill. I'm Keli'i Akina on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We'll see you next time on Talk Story with Keli'i Akina. Aloha.